Welcome to Her Remarkable History. Remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. Bloody Mary I's brilliant fool, Jane Foole. Throughout history, jesters and entertainers have had a prominent role at court in the royal household. Each day the royal family and nobility would need entertaining, often during banquets, and during Elizabeth I's reign, some plays were even performed in the Queen's residence. But one of the most serious and feared queens to have ever ruled over England is Mary I, the eldest child of King Henry VIII. Mary became known as Bloody Mary for her burning of Protestants in horrific scenes. Mary lived a rather tragic life. She had been shunned at court following Henry VIII's splitting from her mother, Catherine of Aragon. Her mother was also treated terribly by the king, practically living in prison, held in houses at the king's will. Mary, also throughout her life, was rather sick and suffered with problems that led to swelling of her stomach. When she became queen, she suffered with phantom pregnancy, and many linked to this possible ovarian cancer. But Mary I blamed heretics for her lack of an heir, and with this persecuted people further. She was feared and a terrifying woman. But there was one woman who was known for entertaining Mary, and also one of the only women to have made the infamous queen laugh. But who is this remarkable woman? Jane the Foole, or Jane Foole as she is referred, was an interesting and rather rare figure in medieval and Tudor history, being a female jester. Her birth and early years have never been recorded, and we know little of her life before she came to court. Her existence is recorded through the accounts mentioned by Anne Boleyn in the last year of her life, and through other records of Henry VIII's queens, and also through documents relating to Mary I. During the reign of Anne Boleyn, in the December of 1535, a green satin cap and 25 yards of purple and red fringe used for trimming a dress were purchased by the Crown for Her Grace's woman's fool, presumably Jane. It's believed that Jane had a learning disability, and when Anne Boleyn was executed, Jane went into the care of Princess Mary's household, the future Queen Mary I. Here she was looked after and cared for, and Jane was treated with affection by Mary, despite having her head shaved every few weeks, as male fools had to do this. Jane actually developed an infection on her scalp in 1543 from this, and in Mary's household she was given an expensive wardrobe, music lessons, and also lots of shoes. In one account in 1542, it was said that a pair of shoes for Jane and another for Lucrece, as in Lucrezia, the tumbler woman in Mary's household, were purchased. Lucrezia was a trained entertainer, and Jane was more of a natural fool or comedian, and Lucrezia kept a close eye over Jane. Jane was alongside another Tudor fool and jesters such as Will Somers, who was greatly loved and liked by Henry VIII. Some claim that Jane may have been romantically involved with Somers, but it is unlikely. In 1543, Henry VIII married Catherine Parr, and when Mary and Elizabeth were restored to the throne, Catherine Parr brought Jane, Mary's beloved fool, into her own household. The new queen let Jane care for a flock of chickens in the Privy Gardens, and also this helped Jane have some responsibilities. But around this time there was very famous paintings titled The Family of Henry VIII completed, and in this it's believed that Jane was shown in the back of one part of the background of the image. The painting shows Jane Seymour, not Catherine Parr, alongside the king, and in the background is Henry's fool, Will Somers, with a monkey on his back. But also to the left is Jane the Fool. She's looking away at something out of the painting, and is wearing a tight-fitting cap covering her shaved head, and her uniform is rather fashionable. Her gown has an outer gown known as a kirtle, with a collar in the front and a pleated underskirt. By adding Jane and Will to these images, it shows how well they were thought of. Also, Mary is in the image and is in front of Jane. Following Henry VIII's death, it's not entirely known what happened to Jane, but in 1553 there was a new batch of orders for the newly crowned Mary I purchased. In this, fine gowns and petticoats were ordered for one, made from lace, silk and satin, and these would usually be worn by the Queen's ladies and nobles, but it shows how well Jane was thought of. But as Mary I's fool, the Queen's fool, her role at court would have been telling interesting, captivating and funny stories, along with jokes, singing songs, and also playing music throughout. Mary I had a strong fondness for Jane as they spent so much time together, and she was referred to as our Foole, showing her affection, and the pair also went horse riding together and gambled together. This shows that Jane was one of Mary's closest friends, and she was given special lodgings and apartments and was also given matching outfits to perform alongside Will Somers. During a St. Valentine's Day tradition, Jane was included in the lottery, and with this the men of court drew a lady's name, and this would be their dancing partner. Once chosen, the women had to buy gifts for their valentines, and the Queen brought Jane's gift for her. Jane was well clothed, better than many members of court, and she regularly practised sewing and needlework, and her daily living costs were paid for by Mary I. In later 1555, Jane suffered from illness or infection in her eyes and was treated by the Queen's physician, and Mary paid for this care and someone to tend to her around the clock. Right up until Mary's death, Jane the Foole was close with the Queen, and she continued to order clothes for her. But following Mary's death, there was no mention of Jane further. It's not known if she also too passed away, or whether she was not accepted into Elizabeth's household. Jane the Foole was a valued member of Queen Mary I's household and her staff. She was very well respected and was loved by the Queen. She was a skilled performer and must have been one of the Queen's closest confidants. Mary saw it as her duty to care and look after Jane, and she did this very well. But Jane was one of the only women who could make the most serious Tudor Queen laugh and smile, and during her darkest moments, Jane brought her some comfort. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.